Hi folks. So we're going to do the class like this for a little while with these video lectures. I'm going to put them up on YouTube. You already know all this. I sent out a message. I'm going to send out a message about this. So you can just listen to these, treat these like they're normal lectures. Just listen to them, take notes. And if you have any questions or comments, just send me an email. We'll communicate like that. So, let's see. What else? I don't know. I'm still planning on having 3 tests. 2 more tests, I should say. So 4 tests in total. The 3rd test will have to be in somewhat short order, obviously. And then the 4th test will likely be during the final examination period, which is, I think, the 17th of May. Some student said that, but I'm not totally sure. So I'll keep you posted on that. So what's really important for the lectures is not the video, is just the audio. So you don't really have to watch what I'm doing here. You can just listen. I'm pretty much just going to be sitting here. It's going to be pretty boring in terms of the video. So let's see. We're going to start a new topic. So in the first part of the course we talked about metaphysics. We did some issues in metaphysics, and then we transitioned into issues in epistemology. So we talked about skepticism and knowledge and rational belief. And in the final segment of the course, we're going to talk about some topics in ethics, the area of philosophy known as ethics. So ethics comes from the ancient Greek word ethikos, which means moral character. And as you may have guessed, ethics is about morality. Although it's not just about morality. It's a little broader than that. So one of the things that ethics is concerned with, obviously centrally, as you may have guessed, is morality. So one of the main questions is, what determines the morality of our individual actions? So as we go throughout our days, we make decisions to act in various ways, and we might wonder philosophically what determines whether each of those actions is morally acceptable or not. Some of the things we do or people do we think are not morally acceptable or morally wrong, and some of the things are morally permissible or morally right. And one main question in ethics is, well, what determines whether an action is morally right or wrong? So this is a question that we will take a look at in the class. It's not going to be the first topic, but we will talk about it a bit. Related to that is the question of what makes a person a morally good or a morally bad person. Some people are virtuous or morally good. Other people are morally bad or evil. And we might wonder, well, what is it to be? What is it to be evil or to be good? What does that consist in? So that's another important question in ethics. Another question is about what it is to have a good life or be a happy person. Now, when I say the question of what it takes to have a good life here is not exactly the same as the question of what it is to have a moral life. There may be some overlap, but there seems to be something beyond just morality that's involved in having a good life. So one of the tasks in ethics is to figure out just what it is to have a good life. What it is to have what philosophers sometimes call well-being. And related to this, there's a question about questions about the meaning of life. Does life have some meaning or purpose? And how do we figure out what that is, and how do we obtain that, or how do we pursue that? Those are interesting questions in ethics. We might have time to touch on some of those. We're going to talk about well-being, I think, a little bit, maybe even a little bit about the meaning of life. And if we have time, let's see what are some other questions in ethics in general. Stuff that we probably won't have time to get to are questions about how to structure governments or societies, right? So, ethics is concerned with how individuals act towards one another, but they're also concerned with how governments are set up. So, questions about how we should interact with each other at a broader level, at a level of society or nations. That's an area of philosophy sometimes called political philosophy, but it's really a kind of section of ethics, broadly speaking. Important section of ethics too, obviously. So that just gives you a bit of a feel for some of the questions that people talk about in ethics. And what we're going to start doing today is to talk about a question about the what the answers are, if the answers that we give to these questions in ethics are objective in an important sense, or whether the truth of them is really just relative to what individuals feel or judge the answers to be, or to what certain societies or states or nations or some kind of other group would judge the answers to be. So it's a question about moral relativism. That's going to be our topic today. That's going to be the first topic that we talk about. And I'll probably separate these lectures into a couple different videos. I don't know how long the YouTube segments are going to be that I'm able to upload. I'm probably going to put these up in like 10 or 15 minute increments that you can watch. So the first topic, though, that we're going to talk about is this topic of moral relativism. So maybe the best way to start to approach that is just to ask you a question and see what you think. So let's take the moral issue of vegetarianism. So consider this proposition. It's immoral to eat meat. Right? Now, let me put it this way. Is it moral to eat meat or not? Is it morally acceptable to eat meat or not? So think about that for a minute. Now, some of you may already have an answer to that question. Others you may not know. You might arrive at the conclusion that you just don't know the answer to that question. But just think about it for a minute and get yourself an opinion on that. And if it's just that you don't know, that's fine too. Now, the reason I ask that question is that I expect that there will be some divergence in opinion on that issue. Right? So some people in the class will think that it is morally acceptable to eat meat. Other people will think that it's not morally acceptable. There'll be some vegetarians on moral grounds in the class, or in one of my 3 classes, because all of you are going to be watching this. And there will probably be some fraction of the class that just says, I don't really know, it might be immoral, I'm not sure, I kind of, wonder about that sometimes, but I'm not really sure. Now, given that there's this divergence of opinion about the morality of meat eating, we might ask about that divergence and say, well, how are we to make sense of this? What should we think about this divergence of opinion? And there are a couple different ways we can interpretate. That's an interesting word. There are a couple different ways we can interpret the divergence. One way is that there's an objective moral fact about meat eating, right? And some of the class, right, or some of you, the audience here, is wrong about it and others are right. So just for the sake of argument, let's suppose that it is indeed morally acceptable to eat meat. Let's suppose that is the objectively true moral fact. Right? Now, in that case, it would be that the people who believe that it's morally acceptable to eat meat are getting it right, and the vegetarians who think that it's not morally acceptable to eat meat, they are in fact making a mistake. They are incorrect in their judgment about the morality of meat eating. And and the people who just don't believe anything, well, they're just, they don't have an opinion about this fact that is true. They could have an opinion that's true if they formed it the right way. That's one interpretation of the situation there, of the divergence in opinion about mediating. There's a second interpretation, which is to say that there's not some objective fact about whether eating meat is immoral or not, but rather whether it's moral, how should I put this? Whether the proposition, it's immoral to eat meat, is true or not, is relative to each individual in the class, right? Depending upon what that individual judges or thinks about it. So, on this interpretation, it would be that the people who think it's morally acceptable to eat meat, that's true. That judgment is true when they make it. So, in their minds or their mouths, when they say it is morally acceptable to eat meat, that's true. But when the vegetarians say it's immoral to eat meat, that's true too. That's true for the vegetarians, right? Or for the people who believe that it's wrong to eat meat. So, on this interpretation of the situation, both sides are right in an important sense. It's true for the meat eaters that it's morally acceptable to eat meat, and it's true for the vegetarians that it's immoral to eat meat. Now, this kind of interpretation, the second kind of interpretation, well, before I say anything about that, let me ask you now, again, let me ask you the question of what interpretation of this situation do you think is right? So given the divergence of opinion about meat eating, the morality of meat eating, which interpretation of the ones that I just described do you think is right? Is there one objective fact, or is the truth of a proposition like that relative to each individual? Now, from past experience with students, I suspect that a lot of you, in fact a majority of you, will favor the latter interpretation, that you'll want to say that the truth of the statements about the morality of meat eating is relative to the various individuals. So you want to say that it's true for the meat eaters that it's morally acceptable, and that it's true for the vegetarians that it's not morally acceptable. You'll be attracted to something like that. I suspect that, again, probably a majority of the class, a lot of you will want to say that that's right, although some of you won't. Some of you will favor the objective interpretation of the situation, but there will be a significant number of you who are attracted to this other interpretation. Now, what this other interpretation is a kind of relativism about morality. It's a relativism that says that there's not these objective facts about morality that apply to everyone, rather the moral truths are relative to various individuals. So that's the position that we're going to consider first. That's the topic that we're going to look at. We're going to consider whether morality really is relative in this way, or whether we should think it's objective in some important sense that I'm going to describe a little bit further in the following lectures. So I'm going to stop on that note here, and then we'll continue this topic in the next video.